Welcome to the 700 Club, ladies and gentlemen. We have a jam-packed program today, but I want to get off with a special announcement. Regent University, the Board of Trustees, yesterday unanimously approved the creation of a College of Healthcare Science, where the college and Regent University will be offering degrees in Bachelor of Science in Nursing, Master of Science in Nursing, Doctor of Science in Nursing. We'll be offering a degree in hospital administration. We'll be offering a degree in gerontology. We'll be offering degrees in physical therapy, occupational therapy. We'll be offering a degree in hospital management, and that's just the start. So it's going to be a major thrust and cooperation with the local hospitals, and the program will get underway full orbed in the next fiscal year, which will be beginning in May of next year. But right now, the region is already training nurses, and a lot of nurses. I mean, there are about 1 million jobs open right now for nurses. And the hospitals are looking for those that have a degree, a college degree, as opposed to merely a RN. So we'll have, starting off, an RN to Bachelor of Science in Nursing. And it's kind of exciting. A College of Healthcare Science is going to be a big, major thrust of Regent University. Isn't that exciting?
A wonderful new addition to our already growing campus.
That's right. And then on top of that, we've got cybersecurity, and we've got a cyber range getting set up. And we're going to be at the forefront of the cutting edge of cybersecurity. Now, the other thing I read in the news, did you see it in the news? They have discovered the biggest land mammal in history. We have never seen anything like it. There that sucker is. Look at him.
Oh, dear.
He weighs 77 tons. He's called, he was found in Patagonia, so they called him Patago Titan. The biggest land mammal. He's as big as a 737. He ate 4,000.
You are kidding. As big as a 737.
He ate 4,000 pounds of vegetables every day.
And I'm assuming he is not alive right now. That is a dinosaur.
He lived 100 million years ago.
Okay, good.
His skeleton is in a warehouse down in Argentina. They put it together, great big thing.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Huge, between 60 and 77 tons. Patago Titan. How about that? Anyhow, that's our. So you saw it here on the 700 Club, and I thank our producers for getting those pictures in the quick like that. All right, now let's get on to the news. President Trump has made it extremely clear that he won't accept any more ultimatums from that little dictator in North Korea. He said, quote, "I will promise fire and fury against the North if it keeps up its threats."
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says today that Americans can still sleep well at night. He said that Trump was trying to send a strong and clear message in language that the leader of North Korea can understand. CBN national security correspondent Eric Rosales has the story.
During his working vacation in New Jersey, President Trump lashed out at North Korea, a war of words with the rogue nation.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
That statement came as the North promises fierce retaliation for the new UN Security Council sanctions. Kim Jong-un is contemplating medium and long-range ballistic missile strikes on Guam. The North Korean strongman threatening an enveloping fire on the U.S. territory, home to several key military installations. The governor of Guam issuing this urgent message overnight, attempting to reassure constituents.
I'm working with Homeland Security, the Rear Admiral, and the United States to ensure our safety.
But some nuclear experts doubt the North is actually capable of striking Guam. Still, world leaders reacting swiftly. The Japanese and South Korean governments standing with the United States, saying all options remain on the table. The escalating tensions made all the more alarming amid new revelations about North Korea's nuclear capability. CBN News did confirm with U.S. intelligence sources that North Korea can now produce a miniaturized nuclear warhead, one that can fit on top of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Harry Kazianis heads up the defense studies at the Center for National Interest. He says North Korea has been preparing for this moment for years.
Its military might be old, but they have 1.1 million troops. 7.7 million in reserve. Chemical weapons, biological weapons. They have 10,000 artillery tubes pointed at Seoul. The damage they could do would be catastrophic.
The news coming just days after North Korea successfully test fires a long-range ballistic missile capable of hitting the U.S. mainland. U.S. intelligence believe that Kim Jong-un has as many as 60 of them. Many argue that the U.S. should have done something about North Korea's nuclear program years ago. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Eric. That confirms the story that was broken, I believe, in the Washington Post, that indeed the North has been able to fit a nuclear warhead onto a missile. They have one that would be capable and would not necessarily blow up in re-entry. If that's the case, and they can reach Denver, or they can reach San Francisco, or they can even reach into the east coast of America, they're going to be terribly dangerous. And the president said they'd be met with fire and fury if they just keep on talking. Well, we don't know where it is, but they're highly militarized. It's going to be a bloodbath of massive proportions. None of us want something like that, but at the same time, we can't let it get on, because what would they do? They keep adding more and more missiles. If they have 60 nuclear bombs right now, and they keep adding to them, what will they do? They'll say, look, you give us this concession, unless you do, we're going to blow up San Francisco. Then give us this concession, or we're going to blow up Los Angeles. Give us this concession, or we're going to wipe out your troops in South Korea. They can keep on escalating their demands, and there'll be no end to it. Where does it stop? Well, while North Korea is dominating the headlines, the American Center for Law and Justice has been quietly working to find out what was going on behind the scenes in the United States after that secret meeting between then Attorney General Loretta Lynch and former President Bill Clinton last year during the presidential election. Jay Sekulow was with us to tell us what they've learned. Jay, good to see you. You've been at the forefront of a whole lot of these things, and I understand I can't talk about some of them with you, but I do want to talk about the thing for the American Center for Law and Justice. You brought a FOIA request to learn more details about the meeting with Attorney General Lynch and the president. What did you find out?
So here's what we did. We initially, in FOIA matters, you send a letter in requesting information. We wanted to know what took place on that tarmac between the former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, and the then Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch, because the time frame of this was just days before the former Secretary of State, Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary Clinton, was going to be questioned about the whole email situation, that whole scandal that was erupting. And then you had this unusual meeting. So when the meeting was reported, we sent a FOIA request into both the Department of Justice and the FBI. The FBI responded back pretty quickly saying, we have no documents responsive to your request. The Department of Justice did not respond at all. So what we did was we filed a federal lawsuit in October of last year demanding the documents, demanding any documents relevant to what took place on the tarmac. So here's what we get. The first thing we get is this. We win the case in court and get an order that requires production. We got about 420 pages of documentation. We've been going through that, looking at timelines, looking at who was on it. First thing we saw was, number one, the FBI lied to us because, in fact, there was email exchanges between the Department of Justice and the FBI and the Department of Justice. So saying there were no documents responsive to our request from the FBI was a false statement. There obviously was, because the Department of Justice ended up handing those over. That was number one. Number two, we learned in the timeline of events, and this took place very quickly, by the time this question started coming in from the media, this was immediately brought to the Deputy Attorney General's office and very quickly to the Attorney General herself, who we find out is using an alias. There you go. Now, it also goes to a Deputy Attorney General whose job description in the law firm he's now with includes this statement, that he handled crisis management for the Department of Justice. Obviously, if you look at the scale of emails here, there was serious crisis management going on. They were trying to figure out how they were going to spin, how they were going to control the information coming out on this. Then, as we continue to delve deeper into this situation, we see that there's an email exchange between not just the Department of Justice and the FBI, but the Department of Justice and the White House, actually to the Assistant Press Secretary. And that's despite the fact that Jay Carney and the others said, hey, we don't know anything about that. Run that to the Department of Justice. We've not been given notice of any of this. That's something they should handle. Well, that ended up being incorrect as well. Then to complicate it more, Pat, if you could complicate it more, you need a whiteboard to figure this out. There's an ongoing Senate investigation right now by the Senate Judiciary Committee by Chuck Grassley and Dianne Feinstein on this whole matter of what took place during the Hillary Clinton email scandal, the fact that the Attorney General would not call it a criminal investigation, would call it a matter. James Comey made the statement very clearly that the reason he went forward with that unusual statement he did was because of that tarmac meeting. Well, lo and behold, one of the lawyers on the chain of emails who was in the Office of Attorney General, one of the senior counselors to the Attorney General, is now the deputy counsel to Dianne Feinstein. So she could possibly be a witness in this matter. So you see the tangled web this was, and all this showed was, and then you had the whole media side of this where the media was reluctant to engage on this. You've got a statement coming in from the Washington Post who says that we've corrected the story to include what you've asked. They also made the statement, the Washington Post said, just answer a couple more questions. I think I could kind of basically clamp this down. So you had this kind of media collusion going on. And one of them saying, well, even if Fox News covers it, we're not necessarily going to cover it, or it's not going to be picked up by other stations. So all of this was going on. What does it show you? That took place, what took place at that airport in Phoenix was not the right thing to do by the Attorney General of the United States. She never recused herself, and that whole matter needs to be investigated.
Well, if you find out the bottom of it, what's going to happen? Was Comey involved? He mentioned that he had enough evidence to bring an indictment, but he chose not to do so. I mean, there's terrible collusion. It looks like some laws were being broken. Are people going to be?
Well, I'm always quick to point out that there's not a crime of collusion. I mean, you have to have an underlying crime that you can then be in conspiracy with. James Comey, by the way, what he said, he didn't say it enough to indict. He said he listed all the evidence and said no reasonable prosecutor would bring an prosecution against Hillary Clinton because she was extremely careless, which, by the way, is the definition of gross negligence under the criminal statute. That's just an aside. Yeah. So that's what he utilized. But he did say, Pat, that the basis upon which he'd made that unusual public statement, which was unheard of within the Department of Justice, and it created a lot of angst within the Department of Justice and for lawyers generally that were monitoring this, he said he did this because of that tarmac meeting. So what has to happen now is the Senate Judiciary Committee is reviewing portions of this. They now need to do a thorough review, and I frankly think that inside the Department of Justice, they need to have investigators on this, because what took place there was so inappropriate. Remember this, Secretary Clinton was never put under oath. There's a discussion with her husband 4 days before she's to testify, and then 3 days later or 4 days later, they announce no charges to be brought. So you just look at the facts, and now we've got them all with all these requests that we've received. The one thing we didn't get, by the way, was they redacted the talking points. They were developing talking points for the Attorney General. We're going back to court to get those.
A conspiracy of some kind. What do we do about that? I mean, are they just going to get away with it, skate free? I mean, all the attention is now they've got Mueller, and I know you're not supposed to talk about Mueller and what he's doing with Trump, but the attack has been on Trump, and the dark state has been trying to undermine Trump and get him indicted or get him somehow thrown out of office. Shouldn't it be time that there's an attack on Hillary Clinton to show the evil that was in that situation?
I think what has to happen is everybody's been talking about grand juries lately. They should get a grand jury to investigate this entire matter, from the emails to the tarmac meeting to everything in between, to the bleach pit. All of that needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be reviewed by FBI agents in conjunction with a grand jury so they can issue subpoenas, which is the normal course of what happens here. None of that happened in this previous matter, as Loretta Lynch called it, and James Comey willingly acquiesced to calling it a matter. So I think now you need to have a full investigation. As I said, Senate Judiciary Committee says they're going to look at it. They're already looking at it. The issue there is, as I said, the deputy counsel to Dianne Feinstein is a witness. She was on these email exchanges, Ms. Herwig. So she was on these email exchanges, so she'd have to be recused from the case. But it needs to be fully investigated.
Can you get Sessions, the Attorney General, to follow through on what you're talking about? I mean, the American Center for you're not able to do it. You can't convene a grand jury, but
no, I don't get to convene grand juries. No.
That's
So
right.
what happens here is we're going to bring all of the information we have to these various Senate committees. And we'll also, the Department of Justice knows what they have because they sent it to us. So it's going to be up to them to decide if they're going to move forward on this in a criminal case. But we're going to send this to the Senate Judiciary Committee and to the House Judiciary Committee. So they have all this information. We're developing a memo that just puts the timeline together of what took place. There's an aspect of law that's called res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. When you look at the context of all these emails together, it speaks for itself what was going on here. This was a massive crisis management situation where they did not want to obviously give us what the final determination of how they were going to handle it was going to be. But what it points to is the interplay between justice, FBI and justice, and then justice and the White House. And again, all of that needs to be investigated.
See, these guys are being portrayed as the fellows with the white hats. They're the heroes, and Trump and his team are being portrayed as the guys with the black hats. They're the evil ones. It looks like we ought to switch the narrative. Can you do that?
Well, it's not a question of just switching the narratives. The facts here do speak for themselves, and so it's the left is playing with narratives on this stuff. I'm going to just give you facts, and these are the facts. I mean, I'm holding in my hand the evidence. I mean, we took a federal court case to get it. So what happens now is the investigations need to go forward now that we have the evidence. We're going to ask for more. We're going back into court, actually, to ask for additional documentation that we think we're entitled to. But we've already got enough here for an investigation to start, no question about it.
Say, thank you. Appreciate what you're doing, buddy. God bless you.
Thanks, Pat.
Wendy?
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like the liberal media hasn't been concerned about facts.
No.
But at least Jay Sekulow
this is a obstruction of justice of major scope, much worse than anything they've ever alleged Trump's doing. Yet there's a special prosecutor digging on Trump and his associates, and they're not going after Hillary and Loretta Lynch. It was rotten what they were doing, and I don't know what the consequence. I don't know really where we're going with this. All right.
The evidence is there. We'll see.